UFC Orlando betting and DraftKings picks. We have 15 fights this Saturday. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the women's strawweight division, we have Yasmin Warigi coming in as a sizable favorite at -305. The comeback on Estela Nunez is +255. And I totally understand why on the surface this line might look a little bit wide here. I know there's going to be people interested on the Estela Nunez side. The reason why I'm not is because Estela Nunez really hasn't shown us much yet in the UFC. She comes from a kickboxing background, but we really haven't seen a ton from her through her 2 UFC bouts. She slowed down and got finished in the 3rd round against Ariana Carnelossi in her UFC debut, and then against Sam Hughes in her follow-up fight. She looked decent early, was winning the striking exchanges. I thought she was up 2 rounds going into the 3rd, slowed down again, got beat in the 3rd round, ended up losing a majority decision to Sam Hughes. So now we have a decent kickboxer, very one-dimensional, that seems to slow down as the fight goes on, can't really defensively grapple. So it really just leaves a very narrow path to victory for her. And then on the Yasmin Warigi side, I don't expect her to look to grapple in this matchup. I'm expecting to see a 15-minute kickboxing match. But why I favor Yasmin Warigi is because I think the power is for real. Her striking is very solid. She looked good in her UFC debut. She's actually got 5 or 6 knockouts on her record. I think she's going to have a clear power advantage in this fight against Nunez. And I think even though it's probably going to be pretty competitive, I do think it's going to be the bigger shots, the more impactful shots coming from the Warigi side, and I trust her to be able to keep that pace for 15 minutes. So give me Warigi. Warigi by decision is the official pick, but we have 15 fights this weekend. This is not going to be a heavy target for me on DraftKings because I just think there's better fights to target up and down the card. Up next, we have Francis Marshall, a -155 favorite. The comeback on Marcelo Rojo is +135, and I like the Marshall side in this one. He's coming off Dana White Contender Series. I bet him in that spot against Connor Burks. He looked pretty good in that fight. And yes, the dude he faced did have a clear gas tank issue outside of round 1, but I honestly don't even think it really would have mattered because I think the pace and the wrestling of Marshall is pretty solid, and I do think that's going to translate to the UFC level in certain matchups. And I think this is going to be one of those matchups because Marcelo Rojo, yes, this is a step down. You know, he fought Kyler Phillips, was submitted in the 3rd round back at UFC 271. He's clearly getting a step down in competition against a debutant fighter coming off the Contender Series, but I think the matchup actually plays really well into the Marshall side because even though Rojo starts fast, he starts heavy early, he consistently fades in pretty much all of his fights. So he's not going to be able to keep that striking pace for 15 minutes. And this guy has clearly had issues in the defensive grappling. So I think he can be taken down here. He only defends takedowns at 66%. He's been submitted 5 times in his career. Marshall, 4 wins by submission. I think he has multiple takedown upside. I think he has finishing potential on the mat as well. So give me Marshall by submission. That's the official pick. And I think he's a solid target on DraftKings. 8,800. The price isn't terrible. It's better than some of the other people priced above him. And because I think he has multiple outs to scoring well, he's going to be one of my heavier targets this week on DraftKings. Next up, we have Natan Levy, a -195 favorite with Gennaro Valdez on the comeback at +165. And this is a really fun matchup to target on DraftKings because I do think this is a high variance fight. Both guys have finishing potential. I definitely favor the Levy side because I think he's just a little bit more well-rounded. Gennaro Valdez is really a kill or be killed style of fighter. You know, he's kind of like that Terrence McKinney mold where he's going to try to take your head off early in the fight, but over time, if that finish doesn't materialize early, he's going to wilt, he's going to fade. I think he could be taken down. I think he could be out-grappled here, and I think the pace and the grappling nature of Levy's game is going to eventually wear to him. So I think Levy could actually find a finish here. Levy averages over 5 takedowns per 15 minutes. We've seen him go to the wrestling early and often. So even if this gets a little sweaty on the feet, I do think the grappling, the takedowns are going to be the difference. So give me Natan Levy. We're going by submission in this one as well. Hoping to see a few submissions on this card. And next fight up, we have a fight that I'm very excited about in the women's flyweight division as Amanda Hebos comes in as a pick'em against Tracy Cortez. And this one, I think a lot of people are split on, and I really favor the Amanda Ribas side here. I know this is 125. Some people think she's a little bit undersized for the division. I thought she looked fine against Caitlin Chookagian. I'd argue that she won that fight against Chookagian, so I don't really see much danger here against Tracy Cortez, who is a solid wrestler. She averages over a couple takedowns per 15 minutes, but she's very one-dimensional in that that's basically the only way that she can win fights. And just 2 fights ago, we saw her get knocked down by Justine Kish. That fight went to a split decision. She got a win over Melissa Gatto in her last fight, but even at times, that fight got pretty sweaty. She's just shown to me to be a solid wrestler, but really has to get you to the ground and control you in order to win fights. Just has to stay in top position because her boxing is not good. Her striking defense, she gets hit way too much, and now she's facing somebody in Amanda Ribas who has very good takedown defense. She defends takedowns at 88%. Verna Jandiroba went 1 for 8 on takedowns against Amanda Ribas. Mackenzie Dern, not known for her takedowns, of course, but 0 for 6 in that fight as well. She even took Dern down a couple times. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility here, and I'd actually expect her to make Tracy Cortez work a lot harder for these takedowns than some of her other opponents have. And I think in terms of the striking, Ribas is a much better striker. She can work behind her jab. She's going to throw in more volume. I think she's going to be landing a lot more than Cortez on the feet. And even in the grappling, I think Amanda Ribas, if taken down, I think she's live to sweep. I think she's live to hit takedowns of her own as well. I just think basically all of the upside lies on the Ribas side as opposed to Cortez. So I will be betting Amanda Ribas. I haven't got in yet because it seems like pretty much all week people have been betting Tracy Cortez, so we might even be able to see this line flip a little bit and then potentially get some plus money on Ribas. But either way, I'm going to have some sort of Ribas action. Ribas by decision is the official pick. I don't love this fight for DraftKings because, again, it's a fight that we highly expect to go the full 15 minutes. Not a ton of grappling upside on either side and little to no finishing potential. So I think on a 15-fight full slate, there's just better fights to target. Up next, Jonathan Pierce comes in as a minus 450 favorite. The comeback on Darren the Damage Elkins is plus 360. And this is another good matchup. You have JSP, who, yes, his intangibles are great and his fighting style correlates very well for DraftKings scoring. We've seen him put up a couple really big scores in the past. But I also think the flip side is like he's shown enough concerns in the past to where I'm kind of skeptical that he deserves to be this big of a favorite in almost any matchup because, yes, the takedowns are great. He averages over 6.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, but this dude is a complete punching bag on the feet in any matchup. He's also been out-grappled in the past as well, and going up against a veteran like Darren Elkins, who's never been submitted in his career. Yes, he's been knocked out multiple times, but for the most part, he's been known to be able to work through a lot of that damage, and it's not like JSP is a mega threat standing. It's more of the multiple takedowns and the pace. But I just think there's a path for Elkins here. Yes, I expect him to be taken down a couple times. The pace probably breaks him in the end, but I do think there's at least a small window for him to be able to land multiple takedowns of his own to potentially out-scramble JSP on the mat as well. I just think the fight's going to play out closer than this massive price tag on JSP indicates. So I think the most likely outcome is a JSP decision where he lands, 5-6 takedowns and wins a pretty dominant decision. But I also have enough interest in Elkins at 6,700 on DraftKings that I'd consider him a live underdog in this spot. So I'm going to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings, but JSP by decision is the official pick. Next up in the lightweight division, Mark Diakese comes in as a minus 305 favorite. The comeback on Michael Johnson is plus 255. And Mark Diakese, we've seen him put a clear focus on his wrestling skills. He's landed multiple takedowns over his last couple fights, putting together a nice little win streak here. He averages nearly 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, and I think that's the key to victory here against Michael Johnson, who seems to have decent first-level takedown defense, but now at 36 years old, I really just don't trust the fight IQ. I don't trust the defensive grappling. I do expect Diakese to eventually get this fight to the mat and do so repeatedly, be able to control Johnson on the mat as well. So give me Diakese by decision. I think he's a strong target on DraftKings because we've seen him land takedowns in bulk. He's not a big control guy, and I'd expect Johnson to be able to work back to his feet at least a couple couple times in this fight. So give me Diakese by decision. That's the official pick, and he's a strong play on DraftKings at 9,200. Next fight up, we have a classic old man banger with Scott Hot Sauce Holtzman coming in as a minus 170 favorite. The comeback on Clay Guida is plus 145, and I've historically kind of been a Scott Holtzman guy, but I think I'm probably just done with that at this stage in his career. You know, this is a retirement fight for him at nearly 40 years old, and he's going up against a guy who, if anything, we know he at least has good cardio and he's a solid wrestler. And I'd expect that to be the game plan against Holtzman here, who we've seen his durability really start to come into question over his last couple fights here. Now he's coming off a sizable layoff as well. Those are both not great things. So even though Clay Guida is coming off a first round submission loss, I don't expect that to be a threat here. I think both guys have the potential to hurt each other on the feet, but if Guida is able to focus on the wrestling, I think Holtzman will probably stuff a couple attempts early in the fight, but we've historically seen Holtzman slow as the fight goes on. I'd expect that trend to continue, especially as he's older now. So I lean towards Clay Guida as the underdog here. If he focuses on the wrestling, I think he could take over later in this fight. So this could be a potential live betting spot for Guida. Guida by decision props don't seem to be that bad currently either. So we're going with Guida as the underdog. Guida by decision is the official pick. It's not a fight that I love in terms of DraftKings, but I will have some Guida exposure, maybe a slight bit of Hot Sauce Holtzman as well, depending on how many lineups I make on Saturday. Next fight up, Emily Ducote is now a minus 120 favorite with Angela Hill on the comeback at plus 100. And this is one where I expect to see a relatively competitive striking match. Neither fighter, aggressively looks to grapple, despite Ducote having a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She has at least mentioned in interviews leading up to this week that she wants to show off more of her skill set, her well-rounded skill set. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing to see her look for a couple takedowns here against Angela Hill, who historically has struggled in terms of her defensive grappling. She's coming off a close win over Lupita Godinez. That snapped a 3-fight losing streak for her. She's nearly 38 years old. I don't think that this is a great matchup for her in a sense that the younger Ducote, I think, is going to be able to put a little bit more volume out there, would have the wrestling upside. It's not a fight that I love. I do think it's going to play out pretty closely, but one that I think Ducote edges it on the scorecards. Ducote by decision is the official pick. And after a couple fights that I'm not super interested in terms of DraftKings, this is one that I do have a lot of interest, as Nico Price comes in as a minus 140 favorite against Phil Rowe on the comeback at plus 120. This is one where I think both guys have some finishing potential, and both guys also have some durability concerns. Nico Price has been knocked out 3 times in his career. He's been finished in 4 of his 5 professional losses. But skill for skill, I do favor him in this fight. I think he throws more volume than Phil Rowe. I think he could land the more impactful strikes. I do favor him in the power department. He is a very aggressive finisher. 13 of his 15 wins have come inside the distance. And then on the Phil Rowe side, I think this is a clear step up in terms of competition. He's 2-1 in the UFC, but his 2 wins were very low, bottom of the barrel. Jason Witt, first round knockout in his last fight. Everybody knocks out Jason Witt, let's be honest. His other win was against Orion Kase, and then he had a loss against Gabe Green as well. So I think this is a step up for him in terms of competition. I do think he has durability concerns as well. Despite only being knocked out once, we have seen him hurt and wobbled multiple times throughout his career. So I just think this is one, there's going to be a lot of high variance exchanges in this fight, and I think both guys have finishing potential, but I'm going to lean with the more experienced guy who's fought much better competition in Nico Price. Nico Price by TKO is the official pick, but I'm going to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings. And next up in the middleweight division, we have Kyle Daukaus, a minus 200 favorite. The comeback on Eric Anders is plus 170. And up and down the card, there's a lot of fights that I think the line's wide, or the line, I think there's value on one side. This is one of the few where I think it's exactly probably where it should be. I do favor the Daukaus side in this matchup. Eric Anders historically has been a very frustrating fighter to back in a sense, because despite coming from a collegiate football background, he's very athletic, very powerful. He doesn't always fight to his biggest strengths and doesn't give himself the best chance to win in a lot of fights. And I just think what he does isn't going to work well here against Daukaus. You know, he's historically a low volume striker, does have a little bit of power, but not a crazy finisher, and then he'll mix in a couple takedowns. That's not going to be a path for him here against Kyle Daukaus, who's going to have a clear submission grappling edge. You know, most of his wins have come by submission. Daukaus also averages over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. I think the striking is going to be low volume, so pretty competitive on the feet, but I do think Daukaus has the takedown upside, has the finishing potential on the mat, and I just think he's the better grappler overall. I think he probably is right where he should be in the minus 200 range. So give me Daukaus by decision. It's not a fight that I love on DraftKings. I'm going to focus on some of those other ones that I mentioned previously that I just think are better from a finishing standpoint and also just an upside standpoint, even in a decision. And next fight up, we have a banger in the middleweight division as Jack Hermansson comes in as a minus 180 favorite with Roman Dolidze on the comeback at plus 155. And, you know, I've said it time and time and again with Roman Dolidze in that, yes, his finishing potential is real, but it needs to come early. And fortunately for him, that's happened in his last couple fights, right? Like he's won by first round knockout in back-to-back fights over Phil Haas, Kyle Daukaus. Those are very strong wins on paper, but I just think the skill set is still concerning for me because despite the knockout ability, he's extremely low volume on the feet. And his cardio is the biggest concern for me because outside of round 1, and I think people may have forgot because we haven't seen him pushed outside of round 1 or into later fights recently, that he starts to fade like crazy. Even in fights that are a low pace early, he's still fading as the fight goes on. And now he's facing somebody who I just think is better than him in basically every area in Jack Hermansson. I think Hermansson is a high volume striker. He's also a solid submission grappler as well. He mixes in takedowns at 1.5 takedowns per 15-minute rate. I think he's a better submission grappler. I think he's a better striker. He's going to throw in more volume, and he's clearly got better cardio. So Dolidze is really drawing thin in that he has to find that holy grail in the first round like he's done in his last couple fights. And it wouldn't be impossible because Hermansson has been knocked out twice. He's been finished 4 times in his career. So it's not the craziest thing. We've seen him hurt. We've seen him stung in the past. But outside of that early window, I really, really strongly favor the Hermansson side. I think he covers his price tag. I wouldn't even be surprised to see a mid to late stoppage in favor of Hermansson. So give me Hermansson. I think he's a solid target on DraftKings as well. Next fight up in the heavyweight division. This one is an absolute banger as Sergey Pavlovich comes in as a minus 215 favorite. The comeback on Thai Bam Bam Tuivasa is plus 185. And I really like this fight for DraftKings purposes because I seriously think these guys are just going to move forward immediately and just stand and trade until somebody drops. I am expecting a finish inside the first round one way or the other. So obviously in a high variance heavyweight fight like that, I'm naturally going to lean towards the underdog, especially when it's a guy like Tai Tuivasa, who we know has that dog in him, who we know is going to be able to fight for our money in those type of wild exchanges. So Tai Tuivasa by knockout is going to be the official pick. But again, I'm not ignoring the first round finishing potential of Pavlovich. He's since losing his UFC debut, he's had 4 straight first round knockout finishes. So again, I do think somebody wins in the first round by knockout. I'm going to hedge my exposure on DraftKings, but definitely lean towards Tuivasa for the price. So give me Bam Bam. I hope we're doing shoeys on Saturday. Next fight up in the flyweight division, Matheus Nicolau comes in as a minus 380 favorite with Matt Schnell on the comeback at plus 310. And first off, speaking of guys that have that dog in them, if you haven't watched that fight against Sumadarje that Matt Schnell had his last time out, I mean, stop whatever you're doing. Actually, don't stop for the algorithm. Watch this video till the end and then go on UFC Fight Pass or YouTube, search the Matt Schnell Sumadarje fight. And I mean, it was literally one of the greatest fights that I have ever seen. Matt Schnell came back from the depths of hell. It seemed like he was going to be finished multiple times in that fight, ended up coming back and got the stoppage victory. I mean, seriously, one of the greatest comebacks I think I've ever seen across any sport. So hats off to Schnell, but I do think this is a tough matchup for him against Nicolau, who kind of has a boring fighting style, but he fights very smart. He's very well-rounded. Black belt in jiu-jitsu, averages 1.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. low volume striker on the feet, but he's very smart. He's not going to take too many risks, too many chances. And I think that really favors him in this fight against Matt Schnell, who has a clear durability issue, right? Like the guy's been knocked out multiple times. We've seen him hurt time and time again, even in the fights where he wins, like his last time out, he's still hurt multiple times in those fights. I think this basically comes down to how Matt Schnell is going to fight, because if he tries to move forward and force that crazy fight by Nicolau, I think he's going to get himself finished here. And if he doesn't, and he tries to fight that smart game plan, stay on the outside, pump that jab, I think he probably just loses a boring decision. So we're going Nicolau by decision. I don't think he has a ton of upside on DraftKings, so I kind of am just favoring all the other expensive fighters in that range and kind of just hoping for one of those boring decisions. Which brings us to our co-main event, as Rafael dos Anjos comes in as the biggest favorite on the card at minus 540. The comeback on Brian Barberena is plus 420. And I gotta be honest, I'm not really sure what the UFC is trying to do here. RDA has historically fought like the best of the best. He's getting a massive step down, in my opinion, going up against Brian Barberena, who is on a 3-fight win streak, but the level of competition, I mean, it's very clear the guys that he's beating, Robbie Lawler, Matt Brown, these guys are clearly past their prime. And now he's facing RDA, who, yes, he's an aging veteran, but skill set wise, he is levels better than Brian Barberena. Barberena, we know, has had kind of a clear durability issue over his last couple fights, and he only defends takedowns at 55%. I think RDA has him covered everywhere here. I think we see an RDA finish here, and I think he's a very safe play on DraftKings. So give me RDA by TKO. That's the official pick. Up next, we have the main event as Kevin Holland comes in as a minus 165 favorite. The comeback on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is plus 140. And I gotta say, I missed the early line on Kevin Holland here. I think Holland at a pick'em price was probably a very good bet, and now the market seems to agree, as now we're seeing him as a moderate sized favorite. And I totally get the line movement in favor of Kevin Holland here. He's going to work behind a 6-inch reach advantage. Yes, he's going up against one of historically the best strikers in the division in Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in his prime, but now, you know, around 40 years old now, coming off two losses in a row. Yes, he was forced to defensively grapple in those fights. I don't really think that's going to be the game plan of Holland here, but I do kind of think this is a passing of the torch style of matchup, in that Holland is also like Wonderboy in a sense, in that the way to beat him is by taking him down and out grappling him, controlling him on the mat. So now we're going to see a striking match by two good strikers, and one side, I favor the quickness of Kevin Holland. I think he's going to be much, much quicker, going to be able to beat Wonderboy to the punch here, and I actually think the durability really favors the Kevin Holland side as well. Holland is very durable, extremely durable. Wonderboy has been durable throughout his career as well, but the Pettis knockout, you know, now aging, coming off, you know, a lengthy absence as well, like those are all things where it starts to get a little bit more dicey. So I just think a lot of the intangibles favor the Holland side in what should be a competitive striking match. I just think all of those things kind of have me leaning towards his favor. So give me Kevin Holland by decision. That's the official pick. I wouldn't be surprised by a later finish here, but I do think it's kind of going to be a very low volume, patient striking match, at least for the first couple rounds before they start to get a read on each other and really start to open up. So I'll be looking at, you know, some overs here, maybe a starts round 4 on FanDuel around a pick'em price, or over 3.5, something like that. I think are pretty good right now. But give me Kevin Holland. It's a good fight to target on DraftKings, because I do think we're going to see those significant strikes eventually start to rack up on both sides. So I'll have exposure to both sides on DraftKings, but I'm leaning with the younger guy who I think is just a little bit better at this stage in his career in Kevin Holland. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier. I'll have ownership projections as well, pre-late swap edition, and there's a bunch of other stuff on there. It's all completely free. I'll be going live on Saturday as well for the Best Bets Roundtable. That's going to be on Twitter, so keep a lookout for that. I'll tweet that on Saturday. Best of luck, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.